History of the War of Heaven, the Apocalypse at Abu Rawash. Abu Rawash, located on a high plateau northwest of Giza, is the site of an ancient monumental complex traditionally attributed to Pharaoh Djedefre of Egypt's 4th dynasty. Positioned on elevated terrain with commanding views over the Nile Valley, the site contains the ruins of a pyramid, a mortuary temple, boat pits, quarries, peripheral structures, and a radial debris field. Although often described as an unfinished or abandoned project, the scale and complexity of the site suggest otherwise. The central structure, commonly referred to as Djedefre's pyramid, was once among the largest of its kind, built with limestone and granite and integrated with surrounding ceremonial architecture. The pyramid was surrounded by infrastructure consistent with large-scale project staging, a causeway, enclosure wall, work installations, and a mortuary complex. Yet today, little of the superstructure remains standing. Instead, what confronts the visitor is a jumbled field of fractured masonry, snapped columns, and shattered statuary, remnants that demand a more coherent account of their origin. The prevailing narrative holds that Djedefre's pyramid was never completed, and that its ruins are the result of abandonment and later stone robbing. This interpretation, however, fails when tested against the evidence on the ground. First, the logistics of pyramid construction contradict the idea of an incomplete central structure surrounded by finished or nearly finished satellite components. A pyramid is not built last. The central monument is the project. It is the organizing principle around which all material and labor are coordinated. To delay pyramid construction until after surrounding structures would create untenable logistical constraints, blocking access routes, requiring materials to be transported through completed ceremonial architecture, and reversing the natural order of structural hierarchy. The known remains at Abu Rawash, aligned mortuary foundations, partial causeway layout, and active quarry zones support a more coherent sequence. The pyramid was constructed first or concurrently, with peripheral features expanding as the core took shape. Second, and more decisively, the state of destruction defies patterns of passive decay or stone harvesting. Columns are not dismantled, they are snapped mid-shaft. Statuary is not weathered, it is blown apart with quartzite fragments scattered far from any logical display context. The radial dispersal of large masonry blocks, some displaced tens of meters, does not match the signature of a gradual collapse or opportunistic quarrying. There are no tool marks suggesting systematic stone removal, nor are there extraction ramps or boundary dismantling typical of post-use material reclamation. Instead, what appears is a blast radius, a violent radial dispersal of material centered on what was once the pyramid's apex. Casing blocks show spalled surfaces and sheared contact edges. Walls are dislocated, not eroded. The debris field flows outward, not downward. What's preserved suggests not slow decay, but violent catastrophe. We propose an alternative hypothesis. The pyramid at Abu Rawash was completed, or at the very least structurally near completion, and was subsequently destroyed by a massive internal explosion. Whether accidental or intentional, such an event would account for the explosive dispersal pattern, the shattered materials, the collapsed structures, and the total lack of reuse or architectural scavenging. So let us envision that event, and by doing so, illuminate why this explanation fits the site better than abandonment or attrition. The morning was silent. Workers had long since cleared the quarry dust from the mortuary causeway. The final capping stones had been set months ago, and the pyramid, its golden casing gleaming under the sun, stood alone, casting its long shadow across the limestone courtyards. Inside, deep within its core, unknown forces stirred. At the eastern end, a scribe steps between columned porticos. A priest leans over a basin of still water, reciting the morning rites. Beneath them, in the substructure of the pyramid, a chamber lined with red granite begins to emit a low, grinding resonance. It builds, slowly, almost imperceptibly. Then the pressure finds a seam, an imperfection in the loading joints, or a pocket of gas sealed and compressed by tons of stone. The explosion is instant. From the heart of the pyramid erupts a shockwave that lifts the superstructure from within, sending blocks cascading outward in a radial burst. The casing stones shear off as the blast escapes upward and outward, scattering dressed granite across the complex. The pressure wave ripples through the mortuary temple, snapping the slender shafts of its columns like papyrus reeds in a gale. Quartzite statues are torn from their pedestals and shattered across the paving stones. The causeway is blanketed in a fine mist of dust and stone. Workers, priests and architects are caught mid-step, some entombed instantly beneath the falling rubble, others left to flee through the collapsing debris field. What remains is not a pyramid. It is a crater of rubble, a pulverized center, ringed by fragments of one of the grandest stone structures ever conceived. When we step back from conventional interpretations and reapproach Abu Rawash with the image of a sudden explosive event at the forefront of our analysis, the disparate features of the site begin to unify under a consistent logic. The radial spread of stone blocks from the pyramid's core is not the accidental product of time and erosion. It is the physical imprint of force traveling outward from a central detonation. These are not stones that collapsed neatly downward, as gravity alone would dictate, but stones that were projected, expelled with violence in multiple directions. The debris field curves outward like the petals of a shattered bloom. The condition of the materials further reinforces this scenario. Massive granite and quartzite elements, the hardest and most durable building stones the Egyptians employed, are not merely cracked or shifted. They are fractured with an energy signature, suggesting impact, compression and sudden release. Columns do not lean, they snap mid-shaft. Statues are not toppled, they are obliterated, fragmented into pieces that bear the telltale signs of concussive breakup. This is not how time erodes stone. This is how shock and pressure annihilate it. Moreover, there is a conspicuous absence of human reorganization. If this were a case of abandonment followed by centuries of opportunistic quarrying, we would expect to find a logic of removal. Tool marks, lifting cuts, repeatable disassembly patterns. Instead, the ruins of Abu Rawash lie in a chaos that no human hand imposed and no quarryman seems to have tidied. The fragments remain jumbled, scattered seemingly at random, with no system of salvage or repurposing. Even the casing blocks, normally the first to be stripped in later periods, remain in shattered, broken sections where they fell. The surrounding structures, including the mortuary temple and possible valley installations, do not show signs of never having been completed. They show signs of having once stood and then been forcibly collapsed. In these structures too, the damage is not passive. It is directional, violent, and integrated into the same pattern of destruction centered on the pyramid's heart. Thus, with each pass over the site, the theory of a catastrophic internal event grows not more speculative, but more plausible. The physical evidence does not oppose the theory, it insists upon it. If we abandon the hollow certainty of the unfinished narrative and replace it with a scenario of explosive destruction, the entire site of Abu Rawash begins to reorganize itself in our minds. What was once a collection of abandoned features becomes instead the scorched blueprint of a functioning complex, abruptly and catastrophically terminated. This theory invites not only reinterpretation, but investigation. If this was an explosion, it left more than just broken stones. It left patterns, shockwave propagation in the arrangement of the debris, directional scatter fields, differential fragmentation between materials of varying tensile strength. These can be mapped, modeled and simulated. Comparative studies could be performed between the debris field of Abu Rawash and known instances of structural demolition, explosive collapse, or even natural seismic disturbance. Each type of event leaves its own fingerprint in stone. Ours is to determine which fingerprint fits. Geological and material analysis can also offer insight. If gases or chemical residues remain in the substructure chamber, perhaps due to the decomposition of stored organic compounds or pressure-generated reactions in sealed spaces, these could point toward the cause. Core drilling and microfracture analysis of the granite lining might reveal pressure-related faulting consistent with detonation. Remote sensing and 3D reconstructions of the debris field may uncover a blast pattern that has until now been overlooked due to assumptions of non-violent ruin. Even the absence of burn marks or smoke residue tells us something. Not fire, but pressure and force. Finally, an examination of the written record, or lack thereof, might shed light on the aftermath. If the event was catastrophic and traumatic, it might explain why no funerary reuse of the pyramid occurred, why no subsequent pharaohs built nearby, why the site became an archaeological orphan rather than part of a sacred lineage. It is not the abandonment that is mysterious, it is the silence that follows. The pyramid at Abu Rawash may be less a failure of ambition than a cautionary tale lost to time. A monumental achievement undone not by apathy, but by disaster. It stands, or rather lies, as a singular archaeological riddle, the ghost of a structure that was and then was not. To continue calling it unfinished is not only inaccurate, it is a refusal to listen to what the stones, however broken, are still trying to say.